Heyoo everyone, I'm FreezeEngine and welcome to my comparison video of the crossbow and the hunting bow. We'll be looking at some of the pros and cons for each weapon and also some playstyle differences which could help you decide which of those two weapons is more up your alley. Let me just say, both the crossbow and the hunting bow can be very deadly weapons, and I advise you to give both of those a try to see which one actually fits more with your own playstyle. So let's talk about the pros and cons of the crossbow. The first pro is its high damage output. The crossbow usually, and I emphasize usually, is a one shot at close to even medium range. However, it can jank up sometimes when you hit an arm or something similar, which prevents you from killing your target with a single shot. The recent update 1.6.2, however, has a change note in it that states that the crossbow and hand crossbow will now keep their damage better over distance, not affecting the weapon ranges, however. So we'll just have to wait and see until this update hits the live servers to see how much this change really affects the crossbow gameplay. This is why I personally like to combine my crossbow with a fast revolver for these quick follow-up shots to finish a target that may have not been killed by my first crossbow bolt. Speaking of the first shot, it is a very fast first shot. Since the bolt is loaded and ready to go, you just need to click and release the bolt to actually deal damage. It's the same principle as with a rifle or the Romero, for example, and one of the biggest differences between the crossbow and the hunting bow. But more on that later. Another pretty obvious pro is that the crossbow is a silent killer. You can kill zombies, sound traps, and even hunters without really making a sound. Of course, killing hunters always makes them play their death sound, but this leads me to the next point: it does not give away your position when shooting. So you might be in a good hiding spot and you might even have an angle on an enemy hunter. You can take the shot, and if they didn't see you, they have no idea where you might be. Sure, they can guess, but that's precious time lost on their end. The last pro of the crossbow is that it causes bleeding damage. Now, with the recent update 1.6.2, this bleeding damage has been ramped up to strong bleeding, so all the basic bolts for the crossbow will now deal strong bleeding damage. Now for the first con of the crossbow, it has a slow rate of fire, or much rather a slow reload. And since it's a single shot, you are dependent on the reloading time. This basically means if you miss your first shot, you should see cover to reload or switch to your secondary weapon and stay in combat. The choice is yours. The fact still stands though that you have to spend some crucial time reloading your crossbow when you could be in the fight. Another con is the bullet or bolt drop, which of course refers to the fact that the crossbow and the hunting bow are both weapons that actually do have bullet / arrow / bolt drop in the game. This is not the same as with rifles, which do not have bullet drop in Hunt Showdown. Therefore, you need to adjust your aiming to actually hit targets that may be further away at a medium or even longer range distance. This brings me to the next con as well, which is that the crossbow has quite the steep learning curve. You may get some successful and even surprising kills right off the bat, but mastering the crossbow can take a lot of time, especially when dealing with targets that are not right before you, creeping around a corner, for example. And now the last one, as I've mentioned before, with the slow reloading point, the crossbow gives you one shot which equals in one chance. If you've rigged that chance up, things will get a lot more difficult than they could have been. Now let's get into the pros and cons of the hunting bow. The first pro we're going to talk about is the fast rate of fire. I have mentioned it before in another video that the hunting bow does have a fast rate of fire. It always depends on how much you draw your bow though, and this also comes with a downside, which we're going to talk about at the con section. The second pro of the hunting bow is that it causes bleeding, which can lead to enemy hunters panicking and searching for cover frantically while they try to bandage themselves and stop their bleeding. This following erratic behavior by your enemy can give you the edge in a fire, or should I say arrow fight. Be aware though, the recent update 1.6.2 has decreased the hunting bow's bleeding damage to medium bleeding. So the bleeding may be less severe, but the fact still stands that the additional bleeding damage can tip the tide of a battle. The next pro I'd like to mention and further elaborate later in the video is the arrow variety. Now I know the crossbow does have a variety of bolts as well, but as I've said, I'm gonna be talking about this in the next segment, so don't worry. Now, same as the crossbow, the hunting bow is a silent killer. So the same statements that I've mentioned earlier in the crossbow section do apply here as well. Same goes for the pro of it not giving away your position when firing. Now the last pro I'd like to mention here with the hunting bow is that its misses are more forgiving. Because the hunting bow does have the fast rate of fire and not just one bolt that you need to actually reload, misses are much more easier compensated than with the crossbow. You don't have to hide for cover immediately, you can just get the next arrow loaded up and keep on firing. Now the real last pro is that the hunting bow is a medium slot weapon. This means the combination possibilities are way bigger than with the crossbow. Even without Quartermaster, you can pair the hunting bow with a huge variety of weapons that differ in their playstyle significantly, leaving you with a big number of loadouts that you can play while still keeping everything fresh. The first con with the hunting bow in my list is that it needs upgrades to reach its full potential. What I mean by that is related to another con, which I will mention here in a second. To actually use the hunting bow to its full potential, you at least need the trait 100 hands. Now be aware that the update 1.6.2 has made a major change to the trait 100 hands. It decreased the 25% damage bonus to a measly 10%. We're gonna have to see how this change translates into actual gameplay once the update drops on the live servers. But for now, be aware that the trait 100 hands does not guarantee your bow one-shotting people. Now related to this is my next point, which is the damage drop off. This one is also related to the fast rate of fire, which I mentioned earlier, because the faster you fire your hunting bow, or basically the less you draw your hunting bow, the less damage you actually deal. And this damage drop off is significant. The undrawn, super fast rate of fire kind of arrows should only be used to finish off targets who are at very low health. Otherwise, you will be shooting a lot of arrows until you kill your target. Now the damage drop off also applies at range, which is where the 100 hands trait really shines and gives you just that bit more oomph to your fully drawn arrows when actually fighting at a medium range. Another con that the hunting bow shares with the crossbow is that it has bullet/arrow drop, which can be quite difficult getting used to, and it leads me into my last con of the hunting bow, which is the steep learning curve. For the hunting bow though, this mainly applies to getting to know how to lead your targets and also getting a feel for the arrow drop, considering that you may face enemy hunters at longer distances from time to time. Hey, Freeze Engine from the future here. So I missed one crucial con for the hunting bow, which is the draw time of the bow. I don't know why I missed adding this to the con list. I guess my mind just wasn't all there. This relates to the fast first shot pro I mentioned in the crossbow section. The hunting bow has the con of it needing time to actually draw the bow to its full extent, which also varies from arrow type to arrow type, by the way. So this is another con that you should keep in mind while playing the bow. Now, if I should have missed any pros or cons for either the hunting bow or the crossbow, please let me know in the comments below and correct me. I'd love to know your opinions on that matter. So now that we've looked at the pros and cons of the crossbow and the hunting bow, it's time to mention two more things that are kind of important to me. The first one being ammo variety. You see, the crossbow has two additional crossbow bolt types, which are the shot bolt and the explosive bolt. Both of those pack a lot more punch than the basic crossbow bolt, but suffer the same problem: increased bullet/bolt drop. Now, in my opinion, these two additional bolt types are most commonly used for the same things, which is dealing more damage. However, you can also use the explosive bolts, for example, as a means of providing suppressing fire, for example. Insert artillery meme here. The shot bolt, on the other hand, can be used to wallbang people, which can be really useful if you are trapped in a building, for example, or if you're pushing a building and you notice or hear someone on the other side of that wooden wall. The different ammo types for the hunting bow, however, in my opinion, can be used for way more than just offensive means. The poison arrow, for example, can be way deadlier than the regular bolt, since it, you guessed it, applies the poison status to any hunter who gets hit by one of those. This can put an enemy hunter out of the picture for a short period of time if he actually gets poisoned and he doesn't have the antidote shot injected in him, because often if people get poisoned, they try to seek cover and wait out the effects of the poison. That means if one enemy hunter is fleeing the scene to wait out the poison effects, there is one less hunter you have to actively worry about. Now, the concertina arrows have the most varied type of usage in my opinion, since sure, they can be used offensively. You can hit enemy hunters right in the chest with the concertina exploding afterwards, dealing some massive bleeding damage and entangling them in the barbed wire. But also, you can use the concertina arrows to preemptively close off entrances of a compound you're in and potentially funnel people to certain other entrances that may have some special traps waiting for them. Keep in mind though, the concertina arrow has an increased draw time, with normal arrows taking 2 seconds to be fully drawn and the concertina arrows taking 3 seconds to be fully drawn. Now, this leads me to the final point that I want to talk about, which kind of goes into the niche of what kind of playstyle you're actively using. Since the crossbow is ready to fire from the get-go, it is more of a, I'll call it a spontaneous kind of weapon. So you might push into the compound having the crossbow ready to fire, and you just need to hit left click to release the bolt and potentially one hit a hunter that is close to you. Contrast that to the hunting bow, which in my opinion requires more planning to actually be used effectively. You always have to consider the 2-second draw time if you want to have it fully drawn and thus dealing the most amount of damage. You have to preemptively draw the bow whenever you might think there is a hunter coming or around a corner. I believe that this is a small detail, but it can actually shift your playstyle significantly, and it can really make a difference on how you approach certain compounds or push scenarios. Now, with the added changes of the update 1.6.2, I believe we can compare the crossbow to the hunting bow in the following way, which is kind of like the general idea of those two. The crossbow is a slower but harder hitting weapon, with the hunting bow being a faster, more versatile, but also a less deadly weapon in comparison to the crossbow. In the end, it's up to you. What kind of playstyle are you choosing? Do you want the brute force and don't mind the slower reloading times and having to seek cover more often while in a firefight? Or are you a more versatile hunter that wants to stay in the fight no matter what, relying on the faster rate of fire and the arrow variety, which can give you an edge while defending and also pushing certain compounds? Let me know what you think of this video. If you have anything more to add, if I personally missed something, please let me know in the comments below. I always want to improve my content and I always want to be corrected if I have made a wrong statement, so please call me out if you notice any of that. With that being said, I'm Freeze Engine. I usually stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday at around 8 or 9 p.m. Central European time. If you'd like, you can follow me on Instagram and or Twitter, links to those below in the description, where I post a small heads up video before I go live. I hope to catch you next stream and have a good one wherever you might be.
Xardas. Für Xardas. Macht bedeutet alles. Du hast dich entschieden. Für Xardas. Xardas. Für Xardas.